So I haven't used After Effects to make something 3D in a while, and I want to flex that muscle because I know if you don't use something, you lose it. So today we're going to be practicing turning some pictures into some 3D objects, creating like a music video visualizer. It's going to be inspired by this visualizer Fonzel made for JID, where it grows like that. And then you can see it becomes a little 3D here where stuff starts to line up. And I just want to practice creating something like this. So we're going to start with this image of JID and create it. Okay, so I have this image of JID pulled up in Photoshop. I like using Photoshop to mask out. It just makes the process a little bit quicker. So I'm gonna click Control U because I do want to make the saturation like black and white. I just think it looks better for like this kind of effect. That way we don't have to deal with different colors from different images. And then we're gonna use the select subject option. So clutch that they came up with this. Let's make sure everything's good. We can just get the little things it doesn't get, and maybe fix a few things. That should be good enough. I'm just gonna click Control J and actually just delete the background because all I really want is JID by himself. Let's go ahead and turn off the background so we can see what we're doing. And throughout the effect, it had this paper texture throughout. So I'm gonna be using from the Ultimate Texture Bundle V3, the high-res clean one, and we're just gonna turn it to screen over JID. And then we're also going to create a clipping mask. That way it only applies to JID. And let's go ahead and merge these layers. And I think just masking out probably his arm and his microphone will be a good starting point for this like 3D kind of effect. It doesn't have to be absolutely perfect, but go through, mask around, and you will get a decent looking effect. I wonder if masking's ever gonna get good enough where you can kind of just like select what you want to mask out, like just his arm. If I could just like hover my mouse over here and just mask all that stuff out, that'd be super clutch. So just make a selection and click Control J. Now we can see we have his hand by itself. And then if you control click on the thumbnail of his hand and then click on the image layer and click delete, now you can see you have a layer with his hand missing and then a layer with his hand. And Photoshop sometimes does this. It has like this weird kind of like border. I don't really know how to get rid of it. All I do is just go to the eraser tool. It's quick enough this way. Just go and erase it. And now let's do a mask from like maybe his jaw out like that. Make a selection. Delete it, and let's go ahead and erase again. Let's just do one more, maybe like right here by the tank top. Nice, so now we have microphone, head, right arm, and then just the body. So we can just name these real quick because when we bring them in After Effects, it'll be a little bit easier to know. And then from the V1, the paper rips pack, I'm gonna drag on just this huge white rip paper and scale it up because I kind of want like the edges to be like a little rough how they were in the example. So to do something like that, we can kind of just fit it around the mic like this, bring the paper above, create a clipping mask, and then we can make a blur mask, invert that by clicking Control I, and then with this brush right here, I'm gonna go ahead and just brush the edges ever so slightly, maybe even changing down the brush size. And then once you get something you like, I'm just gonna merge those two layers and just continue dragging in that same layer and just scaling it to the size of your image. So for his head, it just needs to take up the whole entire size of his head. I like this part of the process. It's kind of like just like painting around. Feels creative. And now we have a lot more of like a paper rip look on each layer. I'm gonna go ahead and use the gradient tool and just create kind of like a red background, similar to how they did, and then also just kind of apply a paper texture to it. That way it has a little bit of like a grungy look. And now just save it as a Photoshop file. 3D. Open up that Photoshop file in After Effects and go to Composition, Retain Layer Styles, and Editable Layer Styles here too. Then just open up that composition, and now we can see we have all the different layers here. You can kind of toggle them on and off. So we're gonna make all of the layers 3D besides the background layer. We can just leave that. And now we can just open the position of each of these layers and kind of just move the ones closer to the camera that we want to come in last. So the further you move something to the left value, so more negative, it's gonna come in later. So for example, if we move the microphone off the screen, that's gonna be one of the last things to come in. So let's go ahead and make it so JID's head is maybe one of the first. And then we can make it so the left part will come in later as well. And then maybe the body like this. And now to animate it, instead of keyframing the position, we'll do that in a second, but let's go ahead and make a camera first and keyframe the position of the camera. So we're gonna keyframe the position of the camera at the beginning and then go forward like 2 seconds or so, or however long you want. And you can kind of zoom out so they eventually all kind of line up. And what we can do as well is now this is where the kind of like the keyframing of the position comes in. We go keyframe all of the position. So now you can tweak it to have it line up a little bit better if you want. It doesn't always, I think it looks better if you don't like line them up exactly perfect. I think it's kind of cool to like almost have this collage kind of looking aesthetic. So I'm just gonna keyframe the position, not really like the Z position, but more so just the X and Y. So it kind of lines up like this and it looks like his hand's way bigger and his shoulder's a little bit bigger. And now when you play that, you have something like this. We can go ahead and easy ease everything as well. And that's kind of how you create like this like 3D kind of like style effect One last thing I will do is go into the camera layer and enable depth of field. And then you can see this is automatically like blurred. So everything will like come into focus properly. And that really helps sell the effect. You can see how that got a lot better. And then to make this effect more believable, you can take more images, put them in the background, have the camera consistently zooming out. Another tip I would use is using 2 camera views and having one above hand. And then you can click on each layer and you kind of see where in the 3D plane each layer is. You can see where they are, which is really helpful. You can see his hands super far close to the camera. The camera is right here. His head's all the way back here. And that just allows you to kind of understand where all the layers are. And now I want to show the technique where it kind of just like opens like this. So to do that, from the collage pack, I'm going to be using the horizontal rip, and I'm just going to bring in the top and bottom. That way it's already pre-masked for you, which is super nice. So we're just going to control click on both of those layers, scale it up so it fits like this. And then let's go ahead, hide those for a second, turn this to black and white as well. And then just bring our image up. Let's duplicate it so we have one for each of these rips. And then create a clipping mask. Turn that layer to screen. So now the paper is on here. And then we're gonna do the exact same thing for the other one. Create clipping mask and turn it to screen. And then just merge the corresponding layers. And now when you turn off the top layer, you can see it's like that. So now all we have to do is just animate it to open like this. So we can go ahead and save this as a Photoshop layer again. Open that up in After Effects. And then I'm just gonna make one main comp. Drag that 3D comp into there, and then just bring those top and bottom layers in there. And let's open up position for both of them. Go forward a little bit and just keyframe it so it opens like this. So the top will go up and the bottom will go down. We can add some motion blur on those layers and even easy ease them. We can also add some motion blur onto these 3D layers. And then that way it has a little bit more motion coming into. I think it just makes it a little bit more lively looking. And then I'm just gonna make an adjustment layer with a light shake on top of everything. And that light shake is a little too intense for me, so we're just gonna change the amplitude down a lot. And since we haven't expanded and added a lot more to the 3D, I think I'm just gonna copy this final keyframe, kind of paste it closer towards the end, and then just copy the initial keyframes and paste it right at the end. That way it kind of just does this loop, even though we're not doing this effect for anything specific. That way it just looks a little bit more cohesive, and we could probably have it close a little bit earlier because I realize it kind of it stops moving a little earlier. So maybe something like that. So it opens up, the movement happens, it kind of just does this like nice loop. There's a little bit of shake, there's some paper effects, there's some 3D. It's a very simple way of making a visualizer. I think it's really important to kind of like practice because I haven't used the After Effects like 3D in a while. So I felt like I was getting a little rusty, and honestly, there was like a few times throughout this video that I was just like, whoa, what am I doing? So practicing is so important when like keeping effects and like figuring out ways to progress. But that's all I got for you guys in this one. Hopefully you did enjoy. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.